Welcome to Junkyard Theory, folks. Today's guest is somebody I've been meaning to get on the show since the Academy Award nominations were announced. And actually, you know what? Before that, way before that, since I saw the sequel to a 10-year-old, a sequel 10 years in the making to a little film about a little cat and an obnoxiously aggressive little cat who, managed to steal all our hearts. And I am so delighted to have Joel Crawford on the show today. Joel, thank you so much for joining. How you born, man?
Are you born?
How's
Thank
it
you for
going?
having me. I hope I said that even remotely close and it didn't sound like something offensive.
Nope, nope. You said it perfectly. You sounded like a
No,
true
I'm
Sri
excited
Lankan.
excited to be here, man.
Joel, man, first off, congrats with Puss in Boots too, and pretty much everything else that you've done. You had quite the journey in the filmmaking sphere. Starting out as a storyboard artist to making your way, climbing your way up the ladder to becoming a director. I want to know, I want to know the story behind that. We know Puss in Boots' origin story. But what's yours?
Ah, I don't know if I'm as exciting as the cat with nine lives, but you know, uh, I've always just loved drawing, loved telling stories, and really, at a young age, I kind of fell in love with art, and in kind of a weird way, I found art where I was when I was I think it was 5.5 years old. I was this very hyper crazy kid running around nonstop, and
That's
there's this
not too different from Puss in Boots.
drew from some life experiences. And actually, I kind of had a brush with death myself at that
Whoa.
young age. So I remember I was at my grandma's house and I was playing around in the backyard and there was this brick wall that was probably about like 6 feet tall, but like I was, little short 5-year old. Um, and I climbed up this brick wall to see what was on the other side. And while I was up there, the whole wall started to like rock and teeter back and forth. And these are
Whoa.
big like cinder blocks. And it turned out whoever constructed the wall didn't put metal rebarb in it, so it was just stacked kind of concrete. And so the whole wall fell, and I fell back. Miraculously, I was kind of thrown back, and so I didn't get crushed by these giant bricks, but one of them ended up smashing my toe, amputating a couple of the ends of my toes. So a very very kind of tragic thing, um, and I was rushed to the hospital, and as a hyper crazy little kid, I could no longer move around. And I remember my grandma brought me like stacks of just printer paper, and I just started drawing and I just kept drawing. And I found this, I got lost in this, in being able to create characters, create stories. And I remember my mom when she went out to, was in the hospital, and she stepped out for lunch and then came back. And she said when she came back, she saw, the hospital bed I was in. There was a bunch of like nurses and doctors standing around me, and she was like, oh, "What happened? What happened while I was gone? It was just his foot, and like, and then it turned out they were watching me draw, a little 5 year
Whoa.
old, and it was just so and so really that kind of kicked off this thing where um, I think it wasn't just about drawing pictures. It was about how I felt creating art. And um, I learned later that I have ADD and I was in like special ed throughout school. And when like having such like a brain that's just kind of shooting off everywhere, there's very rare kind of instances where that you are totally in one focus.
Yeah.
And art for me is one of those things. And so that really kicked off my love of drawing. And from then on, I was like, I want to work in animation. I want to work in live action. I want to create stories. Um, and so then I ended up going to Cal Arts for character animation, and I went there for about 3 years.
Hmm.
And you know, when I was at school, like the film school is such a special time because you learn so much from great teachers, but you also learn so much from your peers that you're there
Yes, yeah.
with, and you create these kind of lasting friendships um, that I've been fortunate to like. For example, on Puss in Boots and on Crudes a New Age, the production designer Nate Ragg, he and I were in at CalArts together, so we've known each other for a long time. Um, the head of story on Puss in Boots, Heidi Jo Gilbert, her and I were in the same year at school, and so you have like all these people that you develop kind of a shorthand with, and I've been really fortunate to be surrounded by amazing people my entire career that I learn and I'm inspired off of. Um, and so, you know, after going to CalArts, I did leave a year early. I had an opportunity to go storyboard on the Avatar: Last Airbender as a, and it was just a short stint. But so grateful for that opportunity to
Mm.
continue learning from such talented people, such an amazing show.
Yeah.
And then I took a story training opportunity over here at Dreamworks, and I think that was 18 years ago. And so from there, I gotta say, I never said I'm going to be a director. I just said I want to tell stories. I want to be part of that, and I loved storyboarding because you get an opportunity to get a piece of the movie. And as one of kind of my mentors told me, Mike Mitchell, who I worked on Shrek Forever After with,
Yep.
he told me, he's like, don't think of this as just storyboarding. I'm giving you a section of the movie. You're the director. This is your short film. You've
And
got
Mike's coincidentally the person who produced Puss in Boots 2 as well, right?
no
Was
Mike.
it Mike?
So Chris Melandandri was the executive producer, and then Mark Swift was the producer.
Mark's. Gotcha. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's somebody I met later on.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah.
here's back to the thing of like you're surrounded by so many great people,
Mm.
and working for this great director Mike Mitchell on Shrek Forever After, I I found this like this point of view of like, oh, as a storyboard artist, it's like a small section of the film, but I'm treating it like a film. I'm making
Mm.
choices, whether what are the shots, what's the dialogue, what gets the emotion across. Um and so really, you know, my career here at DreamWorks has been such a great training ground as a storyboard artist to eventually step into being head of story on the first Trolls movie, and then after that, I directed the Trolls Holiday Special, which was just fun and crazy. And then on to Crude's A New Age,
Yes.
where I had the opportunity to be paired up. Mark Swift, the producer, who's now just such a good friend of mine. He's such a talented man, and like, um, so we worked together again on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, um, and I gotta say one other person, Daniel Mercado, who is the co-director on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. He and I met years ago on Kung Fu Panda 2 when we were both storyboarding. And it was that kind of thing of like, oh, we got to work together. We have the same sensibilities and the shorthand with each other. And so Daniel was head of story with me on Crudes, and then on Crudes: A New Age. And then I had him as co-director on this recent film. So been a crazy run.
Yeah. I mean, something that you said earlier just stuck with me. The fact that you had ADHD and it was just artwork or drawing that kind of fun, gave you tunnel vision in a certain way, and that speaks volumes about that saying. You if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it's gonna spend its entire life thinking it's an idiot.
I've never heard that saying, and I love that saying. That's awesome. You know, it is true. And I was very fortunate where, I mean, I did go through thinking I was an idiot for a while in school. Especially, I'm one of four children, and I have a twin sister who happened to be very good academically. And so, a lot of times, my parents were great. They would never compare us in a way.
Hmm.
but some teachers would, think like I
Yeah.
wasn't trying because I'd be struggling in math and certain subjects, where my sister was in the accelerated program. They ended up testing me in junior high because I was struggling so much, and that's where they're like, "Yeah, you have ADHD." I passed that test. That was the one. um, but it ended up being such a great thing because I was put in this special ed program where I had
Hmm.
teachers that would pretty much explain what you just said in that phrase, which is you're not dumb. Your brain operates differently than the average that is, way that is being taught. And they would gear things that were, I think, more toward like a visual. They're like, you're a visual learner, and I was able to, learn in that way. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that's the thing is like, there, when you're trying to do something that isn't what you're meant to do in a way, you can
Yeah.
struggle. But when you find that, and then I feel grateful that I just at a young age found like art, and just having parents that were like, pursue what you love. And so, um, yeah,
That's really inspiring to hear, man. Because like, not you don't get parents supporting kids when it comes to them picking the arts for the most part. Certainly, not in this region. But
yeah,
you're lucky. You're lucky that you found it, discovered it at such a young age, like you said.
yeah. And I guess, my parents, neither one had like a good career or like, and so they were working jobs to just get by.
Get by.
And so we never had like a lot growing up. And so I think from their point of view is like, look, we're we're struggling. I mean, obviously there's two ways to go. Like, find a career that's secure and you're going to make good money. But
Yeah.
their thing was find what you're passionate about and follow it, because you're going to be doing it for so much of your life. At least love it. And so, super grateful that they had that point of view.
That's amazing. Joel, so talk to me about Puss in Boots. Right now, this sequel comes a little over 10 years since the original came out, and waiting. I listened to a panel of yours that was conducted at the Academy, and what you said was DreamWorks didn't want to go ahead with it until you guys got the story right. And you hear about so many films that are rushed into production, especially when you have a movie that's really successful. You want sequels, you want the franchise to develop. But starting off with Shrek and then eventually having the Puss in Boots spin-off, his own standalone movie, and then getting the sequel like 10 years later, that's not a trajectory you hear of normally.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that this story worked so well, even in many ways even better than its predecessor. Talk to me about the magic behind that.
I do think there was something magic in this premise, but it was also very ambitious and very challenging to crack
And
because
very
this premise,
human also, very, there's something about
yeah, I mean, it's kind of the
existential. I think that's the word I was seeking.
existential. Very,
Yeah.
it's wrapped in this kind of fun, fantastical premise of a cat on his ninth life uh, is going to discover the importance of what one life can be.
Mm.
And what I loved about it right when I came in was like, that's so absurd on one hand, and so meaningful on the other, and really wanted to kind of marry the two ingredients of the fun fairy tale absurdity with a a deep message that is for every human being, independent of their age. And so that was, I think, what we ended up unlocking on Puss in Boots. But what was also the challenge why it took so many years, because that this premise existed from right after the first Puss in Boots. They were trying to work on this story that like, oh, Puss has, one life left. And I think it was the balance where it's like it could easily get too dark and like
Mm.
too maybe complex for some ages, or it could be you stay in the absurd of a cat on nine lives, and it's not relatable to it. Just feels
Yeah.
like it's fun, but it's not touching you as a human being. And so I think that's what what was really exciting about this journey of cracking this movie in a way was finding a way to approach the topic of death, but through comedy, and
And in a
approach
kids
the topic.
movie.
And I think that's what we kept telling ourselves is like, we're making this. I have three kids from age 10 to 15. Um, and we were telling ourselves like, we want our kids to be able to watch this. We want everybody to be able to watch this. We don't want to exclude anybody, but we're also not making a kids movie in a way where we're
Mm,
making we said like, I think a lot of times things can be watered down or oversimplified because they say kids won't understand it.
yeah.
Kids are inherently in a world they don't understand and are constantly making connections to put things together. And so if you trust the intelligence of the audience, then I think you can tell messages that are that take on more challenging topics, such as, the meaning of life, and the fears, anxieties, emotions that everybody feels, but not everybody talks about. And that was what was exciting to like to say, you know what, I think we can do something. We can have something like a panic attack in the middle of the story where Puss, just fear overcomes him, and not have much dialogue, and trust that adults and kids will relate to this talking cat who is experiencing, you know, anxiety, fear, and in a form of a panic attack.
That panic attack scene, I mean, he gets that, and you get Burrito coming and laying his head on Puss's chest afterwards. I don't know, like it was so deep. It was so deep, and it was like very well put together. You actually have that trajectory where you get this arrogant little cat who's not afraid of anything, but then when he realizes he's on his very last life and he's actually confronting this wolf who is the epitome of death, that's when you see the hair on his rise up, the eyes dilating, and it was so well put together. And that brings
Oh,
me
thank you.
to the villain. A good story is on
Yeah.
a story is only as good as its villain. And with the wolf, what you guys did, just even with that auditory cue, the whistle that comes on at the very end, but by when it comes all the way to the end, you hear that motif repeating, and it's scary in a way. You feel for Puss so much. You're in his shoes by the end. You're in his boots.
Yes. You're literally putting you in his boots.
Yeah.
That was a fun journey with the character of the
Mm.
wolf, or Death. That you know, the co-director Daniel Mercado and we love spaghetti westerns, and we
Mm.
also love kind of the Eastern counterpart in samurai movies, especially Akira Kurosawa's.
Yourselves,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and the wolf kind of was this amalgamation of like like a Clint Eastwood type bounty hunter feel, like this
Mm.
chiseled guy who's just he's gruff, and there's something like hard edged about him, and also um, like a wisdom that he like quietly carries, like in a samurai film. And there's this honor, this code that he has, and
Mm.
Puss has essentially broken this code. For us, something interesting, because we talk about like a villain, and we kept reminding ourselves and the crew that like the wolf is not a villain in that kind of common way, where he's just the antagonist, because Puss is the one that's deeply flawed. Puss is the one
Exactly.
that is
He's in
not
the wrong.
appreciating. He's in the wrong, yeah. And that
Yeah.
and that's back to that kind of samurai inspiration, where you have this wolf who's just like, man, this guy doesn't value life, and he
Mm.
doesn't respect death, myself. And that's something with the actor Wagner Mora. Amazing guy, and just such a great partner in finding this character. We talked about that point of view, and he was able to kind of get that nuance where there's this vendetta that the wolf has, but you at least, especially as the story progresses, you understand why Puss is so deeply flawed and why the
Yeah.
wolf might be frustrated at him, even though you're still rooting for Puss. And I think that was what was so kind of interesting about this dynamic of between Puss and the wolf throughout the story, where it feels so nuanced and so grounded and real. That something we Daniel and I talk about is that movies are less about a character arcing as they are about a character in relationship to another character and how they change. Um,
Hmm.
and that, like, back to like what's so interesting about Puss in Boots and the Wolf is where they start with Puss not respecting, laughing at death, and this death is like, I am going to kill you
Yeah.
because you don't appreciate anything. And then that final standoff at the end where Puss can look the wolf in the eye and say, I know I can never defeat you, but I'll never stop fighting for this life. And this kind of thing of like, this character has changed so much. And we had a lot of fun with that moment where the wolf stares Puss in the eyes. And Januel and Wagner actually improvised that moment where in Spanish, the
Hmm.
wolf says, I shouldn't have played with my food, because it's like he wasn't trying to be wise and help Puss learn. He
Hmm.
just wanted to punish Puss,
Punish, yeah.
but because Puss actually grew as a person, he could, it was against his code to kill him now. He's
Hmm.
like, I can't kill you. I really wanted to. And there's something fun with that relationship where there's a mutual respect. And I think that's was a really a cool story that we got to tell with those two.
Exactly, and the fact that every character has their own moral code and pushes it changes through his interactions with death itself and the other characters along the way. It's amazing because like it's not just about the whole existential part, but you are imparting values to kids who grow up watching stories like this. Like inadvertently, the movies that I've watched have shaped my life and the values that I've accumulated along the way. And all this stuff kind of happens subconsciously. And to put it in such a cool way, and like how did you guys know that this would work? Because it's filmmaking is sometimes like a gamble, right? You just
Oh
throw
yeah.
something out there and you hope that the audience likes it. Because by the time it's released, you guys have been working on this movie for what, ages, and you become kind of what do you call it, numb to certain aspects of it.
Yeah, on this one, we did have, it's a double-edged sword here. We made it pretty quickly. We really,
Really?
yeah, we from start to finish about a year and a half. Um, but we had the advantage of hindsight with all the talented people that had come before with things they were trying to
Hmm.
crack with the story. Um, we It's interesting where I like to think about the audience, like I was mentioning, in trusting that they will understand things and be smart enough to know things that we don't have to overstate. Um,
Yeah.
but I think for us, it's like we were just going, trying to tell the story properly, and there is a fear where you're like, will people understand what we're trying to say? Because I think as a crew, we all knew we had this movie was special in the way it had a big message and a lot of accompanying themes to this message of celebrating our one life we're gifted with. This, I think, one of the big challenging stories was we wanted to show what Puss's flaw was, um, and this idea that he's he doesn't have any connections, any relationships that he
Hmm.
values.
And he
Um,
runs away from the ones that are
he
solidifying.
he runs away from them, and
Yeah.
he's constantly putting up, kind of shields,
Walls. Yeah.
personas of fearless hero. I'm not afraid of anything. That get in the way of meaningful connections in his life.
Hmm.
And we're like, okay, that's that's something we want to say. How can we show that in a really fun way? And we found these ingredients, realizing, well, you have a talking cat who wears boots, a hat, a belt, a sword. Um, those are essentially his armor, his shield, that in a way have been the source of him distancing himself from others. He's
Mm,
become this larger in life persona, and maybe lost the roots of who he is. And so we took those things away from him. We in the fight with the wolf, we take Puss's sword away, and he doesn't
sort
get
of.
it back till the end of the movie. And we give him
Mm,
a stick. It's like it's so fun, and that's what I love about comedy is like find the drama, find the reality, and then just turn it up and exaggerate it, and it becomes comedic. And it's fun to punish Puss in Boots because he's got such a charisma and an ego about him. So he won't admit that he has a stick because he lost it to a wolf. He tells Kitty that things are too easy, so he's trying to
switch
stick
to a
instead of
stick.
a sword. Um, Another source of kind of barriers where the is like we comedically have him grow a beard while
The
at mom.
beard.
And I think for us, there was questions about like within the studio of like, well, should we have him shave that beard sooner? And our head of story, Heidi Jo Gilbert, was very adamant about this is an emotional prop. This is to help
Mm,
you see we need Puss to be forced into kind of a corner and start to let down his guard and ask for help. And this is a story of somebody who's first asking for help, let his shield down, and he's going to get kind of rewarded along the way with connections. And that the
mm,
first connection he receives is when he asks Kitty Softpaws to shave his beard, and there's a little like spark between them. Um,
mm,
and then and that's kind of a comedic kind of baby step of asking for help, right? Then the very next scene, that wolf comes in and strikes fear into him, and anxiety kicks in, and he's lost his hat. He has no sword. He's now he's asked for a little help and shaved the beard. And we have this scene where in that panic attack, we really wanted to now take the rest away from Puss. So you got the physical props that we've taken away, but in this panic attack, he can't hear. The audio is awesome there where
mm.
it's just this pounding of his heart. He
Yeah.
can't even hear the dog properly who's saying puss puss. Um, he can't see. It's like blurred vision, and all he has is the ability to feel, and that's what ends up making that literal connection when the dog kind of puts his head on his chest. And so for us, it was like taking these big topics and going like, we don't want to be preachy and we don't want to make something
Mm,
so kind of clinical that audience disconnects, but like how can we have fun with all these ingredients about letting our guards down and making connections. And so um and that, I mean, that was something we followed all the way through the end of the movie, where when to test Puss to see if he truly has grown, um, when he's fighting with the wolf on the star at the very end, the fire surrounding him. What
yeah.
happens there when the wolf knocks his sword out of his hand? He knocks Puss's hat back off. He cuts Puss's boot, and Puss is down to nothing.
Mm,
And then the wolf swings at Puss, and what does Puss do? He has the gatito blade, which is a reward of him asking for help earlier.
oh, yeah.
And then you go, this guy has grown to not need all of these things he's always leaned on. And so we love just using visual metaphors
Mm,
to really kind of, and it's unconscious, like you'd mentioned, but that hopefully when you build that throughout the whole story, you don't have to stop the story and say this is the theme, which
mm.
is one of my pet peeves because it ages the story down in a way. It
True,
feels like
true.
we're over explaining it.
Yeah. And to balance such a, I'd say the story is pretty simple, but you manage to do that with so many characters as well. You have Big Jack as well. You got Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I mean, it's a proper trajectory that all the characters go in search of the fallen star, and everything converges at the end. But it's all done so well. Every single thread is tied up at the end. I've seen this movie, I think, around 4 times.
Thank you. Thank you for watching so much.
Had to, man. I mean, I love cats myself. I have a very. I was trying to get him inside the house. I don't know where he's gone to. I have an orange, a ginger,
Oh
an
yeah.
orange ginger. So I know all about how selfish cats can be, and also how loving they can be when they really want something.
Well,
he,
actually, that was the one of the fun things was,
mm,
which I think right from the very beginning on in Shrek 2 when Puss kind of stole the show, the in a way the Puss in Boots really kind of sums up what we love about cats. There's
mm,
there's there's an ego and an arrogance that we love about like the cats. Like if a cat slips, it's like it's gonna play it off like it's nothing happened. And being able to get those kind of little qualities into Puss's character, that feels like I see how that reminds me of my cat.
you have
It's
one too.
it's so fun,
Yeah.
and I think we tried to do the same with Perito when we brought
Mm,
in a dog in
the
this
dog.
story,
Yeah.
going like, what are the things we think of when we think of pet dogs, and
Mm,
what attributes those dogs have is like they're silly, they're clumsy,
yeah.
but they're loyal and faithful, and they're listeners, and all they care about is you. And
True.
to be able to like bring those qualities that we you know attribute to different animals, and then to put those into these talking animated characters was a really fun thing that I think helped guide the story as well.
What were the unique challenges of working on animation as opposed to live action? I mean, you've worked in animation quite a lot, and also uh, with Puss in Boots too, you adopted this uh, 2D 3D merge, which Spider Verse I think kind of set that trend, and you adopted it so well. So, what were the challenges in doing something like that?
uh, yeah, I think whenever you're, because like you mentioned, like Spider Verse really kind of
1 second.
kicked open. Oh yeah.
Here we go.
Oh. What's your cat's name?
Bunny.
Bunny?
Yep, he used to have like longer ears when he was a kitten. So yeah,
Oh,
looked like a
and
little rabbit.
Bunny's big.
He is
He's
big.
a
He
big
is
boy.
big.
So
My mom
cute.
takes care of him better than she takes care of me.
Oh,
Say
that's
hi. Say
adorable.
hi. Say hi, Joel.
Hi,
Hi.
Bunny. Uh,
All right, there you go.
oh man, that's it's funny because when you ask the question about like what were some of the challenges, like I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of hard stuff, and then when I see a pet that like a cat, I'm like, oh, all the stress melts away. Cat, all animals are such kind of therapeutic animals just by
Yeah.
seeing them. But I mean, I think there you mentioned a couple things that I think this story was challenging, where we had a huge ensemble. Um,
Hmm.
and for us, we wanted to make sure every character had a purpose in the story. That and so that was a constant like editorial thing where Jim Ryan, our editor, who I've worked with on 2 movies, he's so talented, and we were constantly adding 2 scenes and taking away, because when you like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, for example, um,
Hmm. That's an
two
entire story in itself. I mean, you could make that the focus of the movie, and it still would work. Just, I guess.
and that was the
Yeah.
I think our challenge initially was we love these characters, and we know all of these characters so well that we're enjoying telling all of their stories.
Hmm.
um, but we had to remind ourselves the role of the bears in the story. They start as antagonists. They are seen as like villains by the audience because they want what Puss wants. They want that
Yeah.
magic star. And so our challenge was like we just needed just enough screen time to get who they were, and then to discover there's something more to them than them just being a hardened gang of criminals. They're actually a family, and Goldie is an orphan who
Yeah.
has a secret wish that she's going to wish for a whole new family, a human family. And to be able to find the right balance, we are constantly like cutting out. There was so much content with, I mean, amazing cast with Florence Pugh and Samson Kao and Ray Winstone and Olivia
Yeah.
Colman. Um, but so finding like just the right balance so that their story kind of snuck up on the audience. And one thing that helped us was to have a template to simplify, and we constantly went back to the good, the bad, and the ugly, a spaghetti western kind of that Sergio Leone, like
Yeah.
it's three groups who are after
The
this
same
ultimate
star.
treasure.
Yeah.
And so for us, we said the good, we got Puss, Kitty, and
Mm.
Perito. You got the bad, and for us that was Jack Horner. Like he was the bad that affected everybody. Um, and like the wolf is such a personal internal thing for Puss that
Mm.
he exists outside of that. And then we called it the good, the bad, and the Goldie, because in the good, the bad, and the ugly, the the character that represents the ugly was just kind of misunderstood, and we wanted
Mm.
that to be the same feeling with Goldie, where you're going, oh, there's more to her than I thought. So
Right.
by creating kind of simplifying templates, it helped us juggle and remind ourselves like how much screen time everybody should get.
Mm.
And then, but I think back to another challenge was, okay, it's been over a decade since the last Puss in Boots movie. Animation is evolving, the audiences have become more sophisticated, and they've evolved in their taste. um, you know and like I was saying with Spider-Verse, it kind of kicked the doors open in the industry of going, CG movies don't have to look one way. Animated movies can look so many different ways. And this is something that I think as artists, all of us, I mean, I love like watching anime. I like there's so many things that you go, there's so many different beautiful forms of animation. Um, I think what was great was the studios saw the success of Spider-Verse and
Mm.
said we can be unique, we can be different in what these looks are like. And for us, Nate Ragg, the production designer, really kind of honed in on like, to tell a fairy tale story, what if it looked like a fairy tale painting? So to make
Mm.
it its own thing versus not just doing what Spider-Verse had done, with which made sense because of the comic book thing of like, but we're not going to just do something because it's cool. It's like we have to have a reason, a story reason behind it. And I think that was there was a back and forth of finding that right balance of it looking CG and three-dimensional enough, but having like a painterly style where you feel like you could touch, the environment, and you could touch the character. Um, and so that was like a journey. And then with the animation style, um, we saw an opportunity to use traditional CG that was very smooth and everything was on one,
Mm.
what audiences are used to, and contrast that with what we call stepped animation, which is um, where they will use uh, animation will be held, like one pose will be held for 2 frames, 3 frames, 4 frames. And so it won't be smooth, but your eye is picking up really strong dynamic poses. And the result is it feels fantastical.
Mm.
And so for us is that we wanted to go, well, with the ingredients we have of a cat who thinks he is uh, invulnerable to death,
Mm.
who um, who is kind of fearless when he's fighting, say, a giant. Like, how can we use the animation technique to like highlight that? And so for us, it was like we use the stepped animation during action scenes. They feel turned up, exciting, but also exaggerated, and they don't feel grounded. Um, and then in moments where we have Puss experiencing connections or fear, very grounded emotions, we go back to traditional
It's
kind of
smooth.
animation. It's
Yeah.
smooth, and our feeling was like, we don't have to, you don't have to be an animator and a film school student to appreciate the how it switches up. As an audience, you should just feel the difference. and because it's related to Puss's kind of character journey, that it doesn't take you out, but it helps articulate it in a clearer way. So
That's
that
what it
was
is.
the challenge.
That's what it is at the end of the day. You make your audience feel something for the duration of the movie. Most people just want to escape the woes and troubles of their daily lives, go get entertained, and hopefully walk away with something, some sort of message too. And that's what Puss in Boots manages to do so nicely. And then you guys can go ahead and get Oscar nominated. How was that?
Honestly, we never expected it, so it was awesome. I, you know,
I was
and
so happy. I was so happy because I remember enjoying the first Puss in Boots and then looking at the box office numbers back in 2011, and I think the first weekend it was like right at number one, and I was like, "Oh, nice!" Because I always have a soft spot for Puss in Boots, and then coming and seeing this, and I'm like, "Goodness, this is fresh." And I was looking at the Oscar nominations, and to see this getting Oscar nominated was, you're telling a fantasy story about fairy tale characters, and it goes so far. It goes to show how good storytelling, despite whatever medium you're using, just transcends all these barriers, and people connect so well with it.
yeah, well, thank you. It was fun because we put like everything, our entire crew like put so much like
Mm.
love into every frame of this, and so it was actually a really enjoyable experience creating this story with our crew. um and it was such a great way to celebrate it, like first by how it was received at the box office, like with audiences continuing to go, and it having really great legs in the theaters. um the critics embracing the movie the way they did. It was so wonderful. And I think, like you were talking about with the panic attack and the wolf, elements that were probably kind of daring for what you'd expect for an animated sequel to a spin-off, like um
Plus, I
those.
remember that moment. Sorry, I just
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to add this in
no,
there.
please.
I remember this specific moment in the movie. The wolf says he's been around to witness every single one of Puss's deaths, right? And then I saw this meme up online where when he fights the troll, you see the wolf in the crowd. That's
Yeah,
like a, it's like
we
such a nuanced moment.
we love putting like there's a lot of like kind of hidden details that it's hard, it's not calling them Easter eggs because they're not things that are outside the story. They're all related to reinforcing the story, so that if you enjoy it, hopefully you'll rewatch it and you'll find that that we put all the love into it. That yes, he was there when Puss killed that giant, and then the giant
Yeah.
all fell on him. Um, and so I think, I mean, in a way, all of the effort we put in, back to your original question, was like it was so amazing to be nominated for so many different awards, and really for the opportunity to go to the Oscars, um, and really the love the movie received from everybody was just, it was an amazing experience. And I think why it meant so much even to us was there was so many great animated movies in our year. And that was why we were like, oh, well, we're not expecting to get nominated. And we're just enjoying how animation just keeps getting pushed, and how many diverse stories, were being told. And like looking at, you know, from DreamWorks, we had The Bad Guys, which we were very proud of, pushed the style, great story, very funny.
Yeah.
And then um, you had Wendell and Wild, and with Henry Selick, and then you had like, Guillermo's Pinocchio. So you have like these two stop motion things which are amazing, and then Turning Red, Domi's thing, which is so personal and so fun, and then the Sea Beast. It was like all these things that were like, you're like, wow, there are so many good movies that go on and on and on. It's like for us to get one of the slots, it meant a lot. And so yeah, it was an amazing experience.
With what you guys are doing, the way animation has evolved in the past few years, I guess people are coming to see that it's not just kids. Uh, it's not just for kids. It's a medium for storytelling, which I think Guillermo very correctly, stated. And
And I think that's one of my inspirations for a long time has been Brad Bird, um,
hmm,
going way back to Iron Giant. Even
yeah,
when I was in film school, he came in because he went to Cal Arts, and so he came and did a early screening of Incredibles for us and a Q&A afterwards. And just to see a hero like that and being so genuine and so passionate about, and one of the things he always said was animation isn't a genre. Animation isn't just for, it's like this has been, many people have um, stated this over the years, and I think it's something we continually need to push. And so grateful Guillermo pushed it. We've been pushing it, going like animation. There's movies that are for a younger audience, but it can be everything. It can tell any stories you want. It's just you're just choosing to use animation to tell it. Um, and I think that's the thing where, for myself, I want to continue to tell stories that keep pushing the boundaries. Um, and but I think for myself, I love stories that are accessible to everybody. That
hmm,
um, and that I just love like big blockbuster kind of feeling things where it's like I love comedy, I love action, but in terms of all the ingredients, like for me, my stories like have to have something to say. And but I think it's an exciting time, in animation in general, because there's many movies I'm looking forward to seeing this year. So
on that note, final question: where can we see Puss going in the future?
ooh, that is a good question. There's been a lot of like, yeah, questions about like, so what's is there a Puss in Boots 3? What's next? And also conversations about Shrek 5 and all that. But for myself, I don't know yet, but I love these characters so much that I always like, I think part of our job, like after like directing two sequels, um
You
I
probably want to do something
well
original.
I yes, I am very much interested in some original stories, but the experience I've gotten on directing sequels is that I can't view them as sequels. Um, any story is
Yeah,
really, you're choosing a moment in the character's life,
true.
and you're trying to find like the most the biggest life-changing moment and telling a story about that. But the character in your mind exists before the story starts and exists after the story starts or ends, I mean. And
Yeah.
so for me, in talking about, oh well, these characters live on, like of course I'd want to see a Puss in Boots 3. What's the next big life event that happens? And so that's a long way of saying I don't know, but I love these characters, and I hope there's more for all of them.
Over here, even on the other side of the world, we are looking forward to seeing where these characters go to, and also what you're gonna be up to next. And wishing you guys all the very best, man. Keep doing what you do because these stories, we need more of them. They're inspirational, and in a world where you have so much chaos, and you're coming out of chaos with the pandemic and all these crises. It's a tough time. But then again, movies,
Yeah,
they provide this sort of escapism and the inspiration that we need to keep moving forwards.
I'm glad you brought that up. And thank you. That the for myself, I think I'd mentioned what like ingredients I like with comedy, action,
Yeah,
and heart, but I feel like the world it needs positivity. It and
you can say
so
that 1,000 times.
right, it's like and and what I love about films, about stories, is it connects us, as they connect us as human beings. they take us, like we're talking, different parts of the world, right? That
Yeah.
and like you said earlier, like you take an audience and you put them in a character's shoes or in a character's boots, and I mean to think like that, people of all ages, all different genders, all different walks of life can sit down in a theater and emotionally connect to a cat that's wearing boots and talking, and be able to feel human emotions, almost like a migration of birds, right? That like they're in sync and they're
Yes.
laughing at the same moments. They're crying at other moments. They're cheering. Like that's what's cool about telling stories, is it connects human beings. And and for what I like to do, I want people to walk away feeling that connection and a positivity. And I think that's just something that our world needs, is like connecting to each other, and in gratitude for what we have.
Gratitude. That's a very, very important thing that so many of us forget. You take so many things for granted, but at the end of the day, it's
Absolutely.
what you have. That's what Puss has, right?
Absolutely. And but we as humans, it's like we have to keep reminding ourselves. I have to remind myself all
Mm.
the time, and so we got to tell so many stories that remind us of what we have and what we can be thankful for.
Joel, thank you so much for inspiring and reminding us about the value of the simple things. To you and
Thank you.
everybody, the whole team at DreamWorks, for a movie like Puss in Boots, the wait was worth it, and cannot wait to see what you guys do next. So thank you so much again for coming on board the show, and yeah, man, it's amazing,
Well, thank you for having me, Akash. This has been awesome. It was really fun to talk to you.
awesome. Thank you so much, and till next time, this is Junkyard Theory, folks.